The sun hung low over the wide prairie, bleeding the sky into streaks of amber and scarlet, the kind of light that stretched long shadows across the earth and made even the strongest men pause for a moment. Rancher Cole Harlow guided his horse down the worn dirt road, his broad shoulders hunched forward, his eyes fixed on the shabby little boarding house that stood at the edge of town like a relic of another age. The letter crumpled in his breast pocket burned against him, its desperate, uneven handwriting replaying in his mind with every step closer. The words had been simple yet urgent. Come quickly. Tell no one. Trust no one. Cole wasn't a man who ran to others' troubles easily, but he knew the name signed at the bottom of that letter. Evelyn Hayes. She had been the schoolteacher, the one who brought laughter to dusty children's days and music to the old piano in the church on Sundays. She'd vanished 2 weeks earlier without a trace. Folks had whispered, some said she'd run away with a traveler, others swore she'd been taken by outlaws. But Cole had never believed she'd leave without a word. Now, the letter was proof she hadn't left willingly. The wooden steps creaked as his boots pressed against them, the sound echoing in the twilight silence. He tied his horse loosely to the railing, his hand brushing over the revolver at his hip, not drawing it yet but ready. Something about the air made him uneasy, thick, expectant, like the moments before a storm. He stepped onto the porch and pushed the door open. The parlor inside was dim, the air stale and heavy with the faint scent of kerosene from the lamp that flickered weakly on the small table in the corner. Wallpaper, yellowed and peeling, clung to the walls like a tired memory of better days. The shadows pooled in the corners, stretching out like silent watchers. And then he saw her. Evelyn sat in a wooden chair near the far wall, her back stiff, her eyes wide when they landed on him. She looked as though she hadn't slept in days, her hair tangled, her face pale, her dress torn at the hem. But it wasn't just weariness in her gaze, it was something sharper, something that sank into him the way a knife presses into flesh. Fear. Evelyn, Cole breathed, relief flooding his chest before dread chased it away. She shook her head, quick, desperate. Cole, she whispered, her voice trembling. Don't take it off. His brows furrowed as he stepped closer, each heavy bootfall echoing in the small room. Her words rattled through him, strange and panicked. He glanced around, half expecting to see someone else lurking in the shadows, some outlaw with a gun pressed against her back. But there was no one. Just Evelyn, clutching a shawl wrapped tight around her shoulders, as though she feared the world would see what lay beneath. What in God's name happened to you? He asked, his voice low, steady, though his gut twisted. Her hands clung tighter to the shawl, her knuckles white against the fabric. They made me wear it, she whispered, her breath hitching. Said if anyone tried to take it off, something terrible would happen. Please, you don't understand. Don't touch it. Cole stopped a few feet from her, the lamplight casting harsh shadows across his scarred face. He was a man used to handling fear. He had stared down rustlers with rifles, faced wolves on the open range, and carried the dead of his own kin through snowstorms. But the sight of Evelyn, her fragile frame trembling, her voice trembling even more, unsettled him in a way bullets never could. He studied her, his eyes scanning from her pale throat to the way the shawl bulged unnaturally near her collarbone. And then he saw it. A faint glimmer, metallic, catching the weak light for just an instant. Not a brooch, not jewelry, something else. His chest tightened. Evelyn, he said slowly, his voice dropping to a near growl, what did they do to you? Tears welled in her eyes, spilling down her cheeks in silence. She shook her head, her lips parting, words spilling out in broken pieces. It's a trap, a cruel trap. I told them I wouldn't bring you, but they knew you'd come. They knew you'd try to help. Her fingers dug into the shawl. If you remove it, Cole, you'll regret it. I'll regret it, everyone will. For a long, suffocating moment, the room was filled with nothing but the sound of the old clock ticking on the mantel, each second hammering against Cole's ribs like the beat of war drums. His hand flexed at his side. Every instinct told him to tear the shawl away, to free her from whatever horror lay beneath. But another instinct, the deep, bone-etched sense of danger that had kept him alive on the frontier, warned him to wait. You can't stay like this, he muttered, almost to himself, his jaw clenched. Whatever they've done to you, I'll set it right. Her voice cracked, sharp and pleading. No, don't even think about it. Promise me, Cole, you mustn't. But Cole Harlow wasn't a man who lived by promises he didn't believe in. Fear was a cage he'd never allowed himself to stay in, and he wasn't about to let Evelyn remain in one either. He stepped closer, his shadow falling across her as his calloused hand hovered near the shawl. "I'm sorry, Evelyn," he whispered, his voice heavy with the weight of what he was about to do. "But I can't just stand by." Her eyes widened, her lips trembling with one last, desperate plea. "Cole, please," but his fingers were already reaching for the fabric. The silence inside the boarding house thickened as Cole's rough fingers brushed against the fabric of Evelyn's shawl. For one heartbeat, everything held still, the flicker of the lamp, the ticking of the clock, even Evelyn's breath seemed to stop in her chest. And then, with a single motion, he pulled the shawl free. The fabric slid to the floor in a crumpled heap, and Cole's relief was instant but fleeting. His eyes dropped to what the cloth had hidden, and the breath left his lungs as though someone had driven a fist into his gut. Around Evelyn's shoulders and neck clung a harness of steel, cruelly fashioned and bolted into place. Straps of leather cut into her skin where they'd been buckled too tight, leaving angry welts across her collarbones. But worse than the harness itself was what it carried, sticks of dynamite bound tightly in bundles, tarred rope holding them steady, their tips dark and ominous. Wires coiled between the sticks, leading to a crude trigger mechanism pressed snug against her throat. Cole stumbled back, his boots scraping the wooden floor. His hands, steady even in the worst shootouts, now trembled against his sides. His voice was raw when it finally broke free. "Dear Lord Almighty," Evelyn let out a sob, her hands clutching the edges of the harness as if her touch alone could keep the device from shifting. "I told you not to," she cried, her voice ragged. "Cole, you don't understand, they made it so if anyone tampered with it, if anyone tried to free me." Her words choked off in a strangled gasp as a faint click rang through the air, metallic and sharp, like the bite of a rattlesnake's fangs. The trigger had stirred. Cole froze, his blood turning to ice. "Don't move," he whispered harshly, dropping to his knees in front of her, his eyes locked on the trembling wires. He could see the whole cursed design now, crude but effective. The slightest wrong move could ignite the dynamite. Whoever had done this hadn't just wanted Evelyn gone, they wanted her to be a message, a warning to anyone who dared stand against them. Evelyn's tears streamed freely, her breath shallow, chest heaving against the tight straps of the harness. "They said you'd come," she whispered, her voice breaking. "They wanted you to find me like this. Wanted you to suffer." Cole's jaw clenched, his teeth grinding. Rage flared inside him, hot and consuming, but it was smothered by the stark terror of the moment. He reached out, his fingers hovering just above the device, afraid even to touch. He had fixed fences with nothing but wire and grit, broken wild horses with brute force and patience, but this was no task for ranch hands. This was a machine of death, and his shaking hands were the only thing between Evelyn and the grave. "Listen to me," he said, his voice steady now, though it cost him every ounce of willpower. "You're not dying here, not like this." Her eyes locked onto his, wide with both terror and a flicker of hope. "You can't stop it," she whispered. "They said if I even breathed wrong, it would." Another small click cut her off, sharper this time, louder. The lamp's flame trembled in the sudden draft that swept through the room, and both of them froze. Cole's heart pounded so hard he could feel it in his throat, each beat a reminder of how little time they might have. "Evelyn," he swallowed hard, his voice a hoarse rasp. "If it's meant to scare me, it worked. But I'll be damned if I let them win." Her hands fluttered helplessly at her sides, fingers trembling. "If you touch it wrong, then we both go," he cut her off, his voice fierce, steel in every word. "But I ain't walking away. I don't leave people to die, Evelyn. Not you." Her lips quivered, her tears spilling fresh at his words. She looked at him as though she wanted to believe, as though his stubbornness might be enough to save them both. Cole leaned closer, studying every inch of the device, tracing the crude lines of its mechanism with his eyes. Whoever had built it had skill in cruelty, not precision. That gave him a shred of hope. Machines built with malice often had flaws. He spotted a faint looseness in one of the wires, a weakness near the strap on her shoulder. If he could cut it, if he could hold it steady enough, maybe. His hand went to his belt, where a small knife rested in its sheath. He hesitated, his thumb brushing the worn handle. One wrong move, one wrong flick, and the room would be nothing but fire and splinters. Evelyn caught his hand, her grip trembling but strong. "Cole," she whispered, her voice raw, "if it ends here, promise me something." He looked up at her, his eyes hard, his chest heaving. "What is it?" "Promise me you'll make them pay," she said, her voice breaking. "Don't let them win. Don't let them keep doing this to people. Swear it." His throat tightened. For a moment, the weight of her words pressed heavier than the harness itself. He nodded once, his jaw firm. "I swear," and then he set his knife to the wire. The clock ticked loudly in the background, each second stretching into eternity. The lamp sputtered, shadows quivering across the walls as Cole's blade slid slowly beneath the cord. Evelyn's breath caught, her eyes wide and fixed on his face. The wire trembled, the faintest movement of the mechanism sounding again, another sharp click. Cole froze, his heart hammering so hard he thought it might break through his ribs. Sweat trickled down his temple, his hand steady despite the storm raging in his veins. For one suspended instant, it felt as though the world itself was holding its breath with them, the prairie outside silent, the walls pressing in. Evelyn's lips moved in a silent prayer. And then Cole pushed the blade a fraction deeper, the decision made,